Comes in the name of the Lord. Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and it is today is like play day. It is Zev Parat, followed by Derek Gilbert, followed by Carl Gallups. It's one of my favorite days of the month. Derek Gilbert joins us. He's the host of Skywatch TV and co-hosts the weekly video program Sci Friday and Unraveling Revelation with his wife, author, and analyst Sharon K. Gilbert. Derek's the author of the groundbreaking books Bad Moon Rising, an analysis of the spiritual forces behind Islam, The Great Inception, and The Last Clash of the Titans. He's also the co-author with his wife of Veneration, a book on the pagan cult of the dead, on ancient Israel that reveals hidden prophecies, the return of the evil dead at Armageddon, and with Josh Peck of The Day the Earth Stands Still, which documents the occult origins of ancient aliens. He joins us now, as he does on the second Monday of every month at the 11 o'clock hour, to host this edition of Exploring the Sensational and Supernatural. Our good friend Derek Gilbert, you can find out more about him at gilberthouse.org. Derek, always good to see you. It would delighted my heart to see on Mother's Day the picture of you dressed up like a pirate in full pirate regalia.
Yeah, that was a short-lived career choice. It didn't work out. Actually, it was with a barbershop chorus that I sang with in Illinois. The Coles County Barbershop Chorus. That's a longtime hobby I've had, singing a cappella music, barbershop quartet, gospel quartet. So we did a show that year with a pirate theme we called Songs in the Key of R.
I like that. I like it. And, Mother's Day is kind of an interesting time for, there's the moms that completely embrace what we do, and then there's the moms who protest what we do. I've got a mom that just doesn't even acknowledge what I do, but she writes me. Every card is addressed to Rabbi. She had me preach my father's funeral. She wants me to preach hers, but she's already scripted it. And I said, there's things in here I just cannot say. And she said, then I'll just cut you out of the will. I said, I could probably say it.
Well, that's something that Rabbi Zev can definitely relate to. He had a pretty powerful incentive to do what his grandfather wanted him to do in order to be in the will. Something like 40 million reasons, if I remember the story correctly.
Yes. It was an incredible amount, and 2.5 years later, he moved off the beach of living in a tent, he and Lynn, in Tel Aviv. And so it's really, quite fascinating, his story. No, my mother is actually, she'll be 94 on July 31st. And in my conversation with her about God, at first, she didn't believe in God. Then all of a sudden she said, I'm boycotting God. And then she moved into, I'm on strike from God. And I said, whoa, wait a second. You have moved from the outside into the employment ranks, and now you're on strike. That means you actually consider yourself to be a laborer, but you're on strike. I said, what are you holding out for? Better pay? A end time prophetic package? Well, I can read that fine print for you. I can tell you. Maybe that'll get you back to work. And she said, there's nothing you can say to me about God that I want to hear. And I said, okay. This was probably the best conversation we had ever had, because I watched the progression. I reminded her of it. And she said, listen, didn't I ever tell you don't ever use your mother's words against her?
Well, mothers are a blessing, and I know that there are times when we may wish they were a little more understanding of what it is we do. But my mother has been very supportive, even though she doesn't quite understand what it is Sharon and I do. She's proud of what we've done, and the places that we've been. And so, again, it's interesting she's been very supportive all the way along, and that's why I found that picture of me standing in that goofy pirate costume and said, even when I was a pirate, that short, little period of when Mom was there to support me, and of course the picture shows her just laughing at how ridiculous I looked. But we are commanded in Scripture to honor our mothers and fathers, and there are times when that's really difficult to do, because honestly, as most of us know, when it comes to being a parent, there are times when being a good parent means making your child pretty unhappy with you. So, as we grow into adulthood, I'm nearing 60 years old now, and so I've got my own mind made up about a lot of things, and Mom and I don't agree on some of those things, but there's no fine print in Scripture where it says, honor your mother and your father, unless they really annoy you, or unless they, So, that's the challenge. If it was easy, it's like loving your neighbor. If it was easy, we'd already all be doing it. God wouldn't have to tell us, turn the other cheek. Oh, do I have to?
Yeah, I was raised in a home where the message was, sometimes a male lion eats his young, not when he's hungry.
Well, there's, again, training up your child in the way they should go does not mean giving in to everything that child wants. And so, it's sometimes for their own benefit that we do things that they are unhappy with.
I made one return trip home from college. I had been away from boarding school and went straight from boarding school to college, not coming back home. And my grandfather was a Prussian general. My father was raised in an Eastern European military home, and he brought that philosophy to America with him, and he thought he was going to raise an American kid in the 50s and 60s who was going to not be rock and roll and not be drug culture and not be a hippie and not be all those things. And so we didn't see eye to eye, and so as soon as they could ship me off to boarding school, they did, and I didn't come back. But I decided there was one Thanksgiving that I just decided I was going to show up on the door. And I knocked on the door because I didn't have a key. They didn't trust me enough with a key. And he opened the door and he said, "You can't come into this house. I'll pull around, you get in the car. We're going to drive around until we can find an all-night barber shop." My hair was in a long pony. He said, "You're not coming into this house with that ponytail." So we literally drove for 2.5 hours. Of course, it lived in a steel town. But we couldn't find, even though there were third shifters, we couldn't find an all-night barber shop.
Sure.
So he agreed that I could spend the night, but I would have to get my hair cut if I was going to stay. And so
we look at the relationships that we've had with our parents, and we look at the relationships that we've had with our children. And our daughter just turned 30, and we had a relatively easy time compared to what other parents have gone through. Sharon and I watched a series over the weekend on the drug culture, a Showtime special called The Trade, which is, got some rough language in it, but it's showing in a pretty unvarnished way how pharmakia can tear apart our families, and looking at the anguish that some parents were going through, especially one family that had to identify, one father who actually was called to the scene of his daughter's home by his grandchildren. Mommy won't wake up. And it was because mommy had overdosed on heroin laced with fentanyl. And you look at things like that, and sometimes the strife and the conflict between parents and children, and then just step back and look big picture and think, okay, God is dealing with that times 7 billion. Okay? Our Creator, 7 billion just today, and that extend that back through history. Billions of children that he has created with free will, knowing that we would rebel. And, it's an interesting thing to think about when people who want to blame God for the evil that's in the world. Why would God create a world and then allow things like young single mother to overdose with her 4 children in the home, or people to commit horrible acts of abuse against children? Why would God do that and allow that? It's because God created us all with free will, just as we who are parents decided to have children knowing that a day would come when our children would rebel against our wishes.
Yes.
We did not have the child or our children knowing, believing that they would be automatons and do everything that we wanted. They would not be little wind-up dolls or little programmable cyborgs who would always be perfect little children and never bother us when we didn't want to be bothered. We knew that they would be a handful but we did it because we loved them. And God likewise loved us in this way, that he sent his only begotten Son, that none should perish, but all should have eternal life. We just have to choose. He created us with free will and loved us enough not to take away that free will, even when we're rebelling against his authority. So we look at those confrontations and some of the times where our kids were just driving us nuts, or when we think back and say, yeah, okay, I can see why mom and dad were not very happy with me at that point in my life. But again, multiply that times 7 billion, and then just marvel at the patience that God has shown with us on this earth when we see the evil that unfolds across human history.
I have a 30-year-old daughter as well. So she's my only child. She was adopted, and she just had her first Mother's Day. And motherhood was the watershed moment of her life. Knowing that this baby, she wrote me and she said, I finally understand how you tell me you feel about me. I finally understand, because that's how I feel about her. And now I know why you had a watchful eye, why you looked out for me, why you warned me, why you tried as best you could to feed as much of me of the good nutrients of the Word of God, of life, of making good choices. And I didn't make good choices, but now I can see why. And I know that there'll be challenges ahead, but I'm glad I have you who went through this with me so that you can remind me and help me along the way. And so that's very, very rewarding.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we have these generations no different than they were the followers of the false gods, who believed in powers because they could see them. They were demonstrable. There are so many things that God does that are intangible, that have to do with grace, mercy. We don't see the connection between supernatural provision or immunity or health or whatever it is that's going on in our bodies that we have no idea because we can't see it. I'm almost 10 years older than you, and I don't take any medications. There's nothing physically wrong with me, and I made a decision to get healthy and to kind of the Joe Horn kind of path. I wasn't riddled with disease, but why do I have to? Joe could be riddled with disease. Why can't I learn through him? Why do I have to let myself get to where Joe was to make the choices that he ultimately wound up making to get healthy and to be healthy? I can make those same choices, and I don't have to be sick. So, we see the we don't see the intangibles of God. So that's why it was easy for them to fall. I think it's going to be easy for them to fall for the Antichrist. I think it's going to be very easy.
I agree. And I think as we look at the scope of history, and this is one of the things that Sharon and I have been researching now for the last 5 years, which has led to the books that we've written, both fiction and nonfiction and fiction. Her fiction series draws on a lot of the research that we put together for our books. And you see that God, like a good parent, has been working through history to try to protect us from these outside influences, just as we try to protect our children from bad influences. There are, in fact, that's essentially the theme of the talk that I'll be giving for the True Legends virtual conference this coming weekend, which deals with the locations of a number of supernatural encounters throughout history, as God intervened in human history to bring about his plan of salvation. The way he worked in history to save us from these evil influences, these bad friends that were influencing us and drawing us into the worship of the fallen. Similar to the way our children have these friends that once we learn a little bit about them, we're like, we really don't want you hanging around with so-and-so because we can see the effect that that person is having on your behavior. You really need to listen to us because we really have your best interests at heart. And when you're a kid, it's like, yeah, you're my mom, you're my dad, you're dumb. My father passed in 2005. He's home with the Lord now, and he keeps getting smarter for some reason. I'm not sure how he's managing to do that, but similarly, God, through history, worked a plan of salvation. And interestingly, when you plot it out and look at the major supernatural encounters through history, and this is what I talk about over the span of about an hour and 40 minutes, because we had to pre-record this being a virtual conference due to travel restrictions. The True Legends Conference is all virtual, so all streaming video. You look at there's a geologic fault line that runs right through the lands of the Bible. It's called the Dead Sea Transform, according to geologists. It's the fault line that runs from the Red Sea in the south up to southern Turkey, and it runs right up the Jordan River Valley. You know, the Dead Sea is right on it. In fact, it's what caused the Dead Sea to collect there. The Sea of Galilee as well, the Hula Marsh north of the Sea of Galilee, runs up the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon between the Lebanon Mountains and the anti-Lebanon Mountains, which includes Mount Hermon. And when we start plotting out the major incidents that took place in biblical history, where did the Watchers descend? Well, it was on Mount Hermon. Well, that's right on this fault line. What was the holy mountain of Baal? Well, that's Mount Zaphon. Oh, look, that's right on the fault line up there. What about the city of the storm god, which was everyone in the ancient world knew was the city of Aleppo? Well, that's just a little east of there. Okay, what about where Jesus walked on water? Okay, Sea of Galilee, that's right on it. How about the Gerasene demoniac? Okay, that was right there. Where did Jacob wrestle the angel? Well, that's right. You find it's all along this line. Where was Elisha caught up in a chariot and pulled up to heaven? Well, it's right there, right at the Jordan River. That's the fault line right there. So all of these things happened along this fault line. There were a couple of exceptions, one being the Tower of Babel, of course, which is in far southeast Iraq, and of course the Babylonian captivity, which again was in Iraq, but God brought them back, brought the people back to this place, to Jerusalem, which is essentially 30 miles west of that fault line, where God decreed from very early times, from the time of Abraham, when the binding of Isaac took place on Mount Moriah, which became the place where David purchased the threshing floor of Araunah, the portal where the angel of the Lord, a Christophany, was there with the sword as he was smiting the people of Jerusalem, and there God said, okay, that's enough. So all of these things happen right along that line, and there are some very strange megalithic structures that are also along this line, and I go into that during the presentation as well. But there's no doubt that there's supernatural activity that takes place all over the world. I mean, not just in Israel, not just in Jordan, in Lebanon, all over the world, supernatural things take place. But the Bible is focused on that region. That is where Jesus was born, lived, taught, died, rose from the dead, and will return right along that area where Moses and the Israelites first targeted Og of the kingdom of Bashan before crossing into Canaan to take the land that God had declared his. And so it's geographically speaking, it's all concentrated on this little area in the Middle East along this fault line. And we also connect it both historically and prophetically to things that stretch from the first 2 verses of Genesis to Revelation chapter 21, and the long rebellion by not just these fallen angels, Satan, Lucifer, and his minions, but also the I think even earlier rebel, Leviathan, or the force of chaos. And so all of that is combined. Those are the evil friends that God's children have been hanging out with for the last 6,000-7,000 years or whatever, that he's been trying to protect us from, like a good father. And yet a lot of us still want to say, well, Dad, you're old, you're boring, what do you know? You just want to, take away you just don't want me to have any fun.
But the truth is that the Western world is enamored with horror, with mythology, with giants, with supernatural heroes, superheroes of any kind, good and evil. We went from Superman to Bizarro. We went to the bad Peter Parker, The Superman,
from
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man to what was the other guy? Oh gosh, what was the evil one?
Jason, what was the evil one for Spider-Man?
Yeah, yeah, not Spawn. It wasn't.
Doc Ock.
Yeah, I'm not.
The Vulture.
The Vulture.
No, I'm thinking of the evil one. It was sort of like the anti-Spider-Man.
Yeah, when Spider-Man turned dark.
Oh, Venom.
Venom.
That's it.
That's it. Venom. So, we see that and we're attracted to that because we spend the money at the box office. They buy the dolls, the toys. People have loved horror. Bela Lugosi, that was on my black and white TV as a kid. The Godzilla, all these things. We've just been thrown into mythology. But I'm not even sure who we talked with last week, but we were talking about the Bible being presented in the form of myth, and myth as a literary tool, not myth as in mythological, meaning
right.
It's all made up. The story of the flood is myth. In a literary standpoint, it's told as a myth. Not that it is not true, okay, but the form and format, the form, fit, and function of its presentation is something that had not happened, that was going to happen, activity that was based on something that was foretold but not seen, and that's what myth, the story presentation of myth is about. Are we seeing, because there's a lot more coming out of the Middle East than we've seen in a long time. We've seen new digs, new discoveries. We're still finding big bodies that confirm large, oversized human beings being dug up, and are they the Nephilim? Are they ancient aliens? My friend with the hair would tell you that these are ancient aliens, but we know the origin in Genesis 6 of where all this comes from. Are you finding there's a new interest? There's a new revival in this biblical aspect, maybe because people have more time to dust off older teachings, and they found it interesting. Where do you think this interest is coming from?
I think there's always been an interest in the supernatural, and if the Bible and those who teach the Bible won't address the supernatural aspects of the human experience, we're going to lose those who are interested in the supernatural to the New Age teachers like Crazy Hair Giorgio. My dad was interested in this, years and years ago. I remember as a kid, Dad bought Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, and this was when he was in his late 30s, early 40s. But he also read Chariots of the Gods by Von Daniken and the follow-up to Gold of the Gods. And he also read Those Incredible Christians, which was a conspiracy theory that the apostles took Jesus off the cross before he died and he was revived, and they smuggled him out of Jerusalem, that sort of thing. Because our church at the time was a very liturgical church where it was very dry, and Christian theology was never really anything more than sort of a guide for living, Jesus as sort of a life coach. And a lot of our churches are still that way. I think with the recent disclosures of those Navy videos captured by the F-18 planes back in 2008, 2004, 2014, videos that have been around on the web for almost 13, 14 years now. The reason they're being featured now, I think, and that the Pentagon is admitting, this is legitimate video, is because there is a growing interest in finding meaning in something other than the Bible. And if we can find something transcendent in the idea of brothers from outer space, well, so be it. When Sharon and Josh Peck and I attended the 50th anniversary of the 1947 Roswell crash back a couple of summers ago, we found that most of the people there weren't really that interested in the science or the technology of how the craft allegedly crossed the galaxy from somewhere else. They were really looking for something transcendent, something spiritual. I mean, there were crystals for sale and palms being read all over the place, but very few. I mean, we didn't see anybody recruiting for MIT or Caltech, and very few, just one church there saying, hey, we got some answers here. As Christians, we understand that Earth has been visited by inhuman entities for thousands of years. We know this. It's in the Bible. And yet, for most of us, the Bible has been de-supernaturalized, which is why people are turning elsewhere for answers.
Where do they think, in the book of Job, where Satan is standing in front of the throne of God, if he started out on earth, he traveled through the atmosphere, through outer space, into the third heaven, maintaining a form which could present itself conversationally, audibly, and auditorially before God, and answer the question, where you been? What you been up to, bud? Okay, how things going? Well, I've been, wandering to and fro. And he said, well, hey, have you considered my son Job? No, I hadn't. Why? He said, well, let me make a little wager with you, I don't think there's anything you can possibly do to this man. He said, as a matter of fact, I'm going to take all the boundaries off. You can do everything, but you cannot kill him. You can do anything you want, but you can't kill him. So you go back down and you see whether or not he really is the man that I say that he is. So he gets what? Does he get in his spacecraft? Does he get in his flying saucer? All right? No, he now leaves the third heaven, travels through outer space. We've got it charted through the atmosphere. We know what the atmosphere is. We know where the atmosphere changes from atmosphere to outer space. There is a height requirement, okay, that says this is atmosphere, this is outer space, above this point's outer space, back down to the earth. Well, if there's one, and there's one occasion, and he has that ability, where do these angels come from that are enthroned and encamped? And they're the good angels. And although we've made up this 1/3, because it's not in the Bible, that 1/3 followed Satan. But do the others have the ability to travel from? Well, we know that. Gabriel, where did he come from? And Michael, where did he come from? And Yeshua, where did he come from? Okay. These are intergalactic travelers. And then we have the fallen, who B'nai Elohim, and the daughters of man, and their offspring. How'd they get here? Okay, did they rent a camel in heaven with wings and fly here with Ahmed, or what? And so we can't wrap our minds around it, so we have to make up something to explain it, and that sells. That's the sizzle.
Right.
Not the steak.
Well, and the enemy has been encouraging that for a long time, as Josh and I wrote in the book, The Day the Earth Stands Still. This fascination with the spirit realm is very old, and the enemy's been willing to kind of redirect us, like, hey, we've got the answers for you, because many of us, many theologians over the centuries have just denied the existence of those spirit beings. But as you know, until the 4th century, the default belief of the early church was that the sons of God were spirit beings, and the Nephilim were the literal offspring of them and human women. And again, the presentation in for the True Legends Conference this coming week will show the monuments to the worship of these entities. And in fact, it is so predominant now as they find these megalithic tombs in what was the ancient land of Bashan that I argue that it's essentially that the ancient land of Bashan, ruled by Og in the days of Moses, was essentially a giant necropolis. And there's extra biblical evidence to that fact as well.
Well, it's been interesting that my conversations with our good friend Mike Heiser we've been spending a great deal of time in that 400-year intertestamental period where we found secondary sources that aren't canonized, but nevertheless were the contemporary reading material of the authors and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and anybody who was reading anything about what was going on under the Seleucids, under the Greek historical documents, under the handoff of the Roman conquest, and what was going on, and the Book of Maccabees and Jubilee and First and Second Enoch and all that were the contemporary writings of the time. It's like saying that when I was in college, Aristotle and Plato and of course the famous Socrates. You remember him?
Excellent. Yeah.
Excellent. There you go. Socrates. Oh yeah, man. Excellent. We're talking with Derek Gilbert, host of Skywatch TV, Sci Friday, and 5 in 10. Which used to be the name of a whole chain of stores. Now it's the name of a very popular program that he does, 5 key points in 10 minutes, and it's a regular feature on Skywatch TV as they go through a very incredible expansion of building an auditorium and a new studio for housing of live audiences, and maybe I'll have the opportunity to make it out there and sit there and regale with all of the lore of from the Jew at the center of controversy, trying to fill the void left 2,000 years ago when a Jew was stirring things up, feeling like somebody had to come along and stir the pot and keep this thing going. And so taking on the establishment, as I did in college, once again taking it on now from a biblical platform. But you can follow him at gilberthouse.org or Skywatch TV. Great book, Veneration, an amazing read, and why all these things that are being hidden from view are now being revealed in this time, at the same time we're dealing with an invisible virus, pestilence, that's gripping every continent. And it's the first recorded time in history that every continent is involved. First time recorded. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened before, and I always use the recorded because, we don't know, 600 years ago somebody wasn't recording the viruses that were occurring in other continents. But in modern medical annals, this is the first. And is there significance? Is this a call? Is this a cleansing? Is this a call to be set apart? What is behind all of this? And we're going to talk about that and touch on that. We're going to talk on the upcoming conference. Then there's still ways to, now it's unlimited registration.
Correct. Yeah.
There's no limit, and if you missed out on registering for the upcoming True Legends Conference, you can still do that at skywatchtv.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue in this discussion with our good friend, Derek Gilbert. We'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors,
special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events.
Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and as we do on the second Monday of every month at the 11 o'clock hour, we meet with our good friend, Derek Gilbert from Skywatch TV and gilberthouse.org. Derek, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things that I've said this in writing many times, that you are one of the best researchers. You and your wife together are incredible researchers in fleshing out things that take a lot of digging. You are the kind of like the data archaeologists. You know, the literary archaeologists is maybe what we'll call you. But you've uncovered a lot of things that are there, but they're just beneath the surface. We are given the culture and the environment, and to the right interpretation of Scripture is to understand the culture and the environment in which the words are being written to. The author is writing to the audience in their contemporary words, and then we have to after we understand them in context, then we have to see where they fit in today's narrative. You can't read it through a 21st century lens. You have to read it through the lens of when it was written and what was going on and what the response of the people was, and why God was meting out justice, destroying and sending people into battle. It wasn't because he likes rivers of blood and he wants death, but he'll do everything he can to protect the seed line of Messiah, and that's the underlying theme of everything within Scripture is for Jesus to be born and for Jesus to return. And as long as we can triangulate Genesis 3:15, John 3:16, and the second coming of Messiah. You have to have 3 points to triangulate in order to establish a base of reference, and those are the triangulation points. Everything else fills in all the blanks, and you do that quite well.
Well, thank you. It's I guess the Lord wired our brains a certain way for his reasons. I'm just thankful that he's found a way to make this weird wiring useful. My mom used to say, when I was a kid reading a book, I would be like a pit bull with a bone, and would have to, when it was time for dinner, she'd have to come touch me because, I would just be so into what I was reading that I would literally not hear her. So that sometimes is not a good characteristic, but I guess you're trying to dig into research by the true scholars, people like Dr. Heiser who can read the original languages, or the archaeologists like Randall Price or Stephen Collins, who are actually on their hands and knees going into the caves or actually moving the dirt to find these tablets or evidence of these ancient structures. I read what they write. I don't go into the field to dig. That's not my calling. But I guess in some ways, being able to look down from the 30,000-foot view and try to fit together patterns, if God's given me some ability to do that, well then, praise God for finding a way again to use this weird wiring inside my head, because I find that stuff fascinating. Other people would find it incredibly boring.
Tell me more about the Legends Conference. Who's speaking? What the lineup is? Is there a theme? And what is this all about?
The theme of the conference, and this is by Steve Quayle and Gen 6 Productions. The conference title is Ancient Cataclysms and Coming Catastrophes: The Pre-Adamic Era and the Return of the Days of Noah. So you've got some really fascinating stuff here. The pre-Adamic era. What? I thought Adam was the first. What do you mean pre-Adamic era? Well, that was where, and the speakers include Steve, of course. L.A. Marzulli will be one of the other speakers. Russ Dizdar, our good friend Carl Teichrieb, who is an amazing researcher into the resurgence of paganism. He's finding through his research that the pagans who worship the old gods are reporting consistently that they're hearing from these small g gods that they're being told the time has come to rebuild their temples. So Gary Wayne, who's the author of the very popular book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, Celeste Solum, who's dealing with some health issues right now, I understand. Bob Griswold will be another speaker. And Darren Geisinger, our good friend from here in the Ozarks, will be serving as sort of the master of ceremonies, but doing it, virtually. All of this is being streamed to the internet because of travel restrictions. So, in addition to this conference coming, beginning Friday, the 15th of May, running through, Friday and Saturday, the 15th and 16th, people who sign up will get access to all of the recorded presentations from last year's conference, which was recorded at the Mansion Theater in Branson. And the topic of last year's conference was answering the alien questions. So Steve Quayle, researcher George Knapp, L.A. Marzulli again, Gary Stearman, and many others. Oh, Mike Adams, I almost forgot. Mike Adams, the health ranger, was a speaker last year and will be again this year. So essentially, people who sign up this year get two conferences for the price of one. But the pre-Adamic era is what led Sharon and I to the research that we've been doing, as I mentioned in the first segment, that portal, that Dead Sea transform, that fault line that runs right up the Arava through the Dead Sea, the Jordan Valley, up through the Sea of Galilee, between the mountains of Lebanon, alongside Mount Hermon and so forth. When you look at the region of ancient Bashan, which is essentially north and east of the Sea of Galilee, up to about the region of Mount Hermon, over as far east into Syria as Jabal al-Druze, or the Mountain of the Druze in Syria. The ancient Argob was the way it was described in the book of Joshua, I believe, when they allocated the territories to the tribes. That would have been the half-tribe of Manasseh had control of that region. The number of dolmens, which are ancient funerary monuments, essentially, many of them are in a very simple trilithon formation, which is two big slabs of rock, vertical slabs, with a tabletop slab across the top. They're found all over the world, but there are more of them in the Jordan Valley along this Dead Sea transform than anywhere else in the world. And they seem to be clustered in two main areas. One of them is in the ancient land of Bashan. And we learned after we'd written the book Veneration, sadly, I wish we'd known this before the book was finished, that archaeologists working in Israel for the Israel Antiquities Authority have said now that you can no longer use the term Dolmen Field, okay, an area where you've got a bunch of these together. You can't use the term Dolmen Field in the Golan Heights anymore, ancient Bashan, because there are so many you can't tell where one field ends and the next one begins. And this is why I said in the first segment that ancient Bashan was essentially a giant necropolis. You've got so many dolmens in the land ruled by Og, the last of the remnant of the Rephaim, that it's just one giant necropolis. And interestingly, in texts that were found at the ancient Amorite kingdom of Ugarit, which is in Syria, it's on the Mediterranean coast. It's northwestern Syria. It was destroyed around the year 1200 BC during what scholars call the Bronze Age collapse. Texts found from ancient Ugarit, there's a legend there called the Legend of Akhat, A-Q-H-A-T. And this is a young man who was the son of a king. The king's name was Daniel, interestingly. And Akhat was killed by the war goddess Anat because he wouldn't give her the magic bow that he'd been given by one of the other gods. So she arranged for him to be killed. And the father, Daniel, is mourning his son and trying to find out who was responsible for his death. But he says, I will weep for him, I will mourn for him, I will bury him in a hole for the gods of the earth. The equivalent phrase in Hebrew would be Eretz Elohim. Okay, gods of the earth. Well, that's talking about the Rephaim. In other words, the demonic spirits that proceeded from the Nephilim after death. But then when he finally finds out who's responsible, this King Daniel says that he will bury his son in a hole, in a tomb, in a hole for the gods of the earth, in a tomb at Kinneret. Well, Kinneret's the Sea of Galilee.
Right.
So here we've got documentation from the time of the judges that the pagans of the ancient world understood that there was something special and connected to the realm of the dead around the Sea of Galilee, which is that area, when you look at a map north of the Sea of Galilee, the number of dolmens in that area, again, it's one giant necropolis. It was an area that was known for veneration of the dead. The other location in the Jordan Valley, where you've got the clusters of these megalithic monuments for the veneration of the dead, is at the base of an archaeological site near the Dead Sea. About 8 miles northeast of the Dead Sea is a site called Tal El Hammam. I think we've talked about this before. A team from Trinity Southwest University in Albuquerque has been digging there for the last 15 years. Dr. Stephen Collins wrote a book about this about 5 years ago, The Discovery of the City of Sodom. This is the location of ancient Sodom. They found scientific evidence showing that the city was destroyed by some incredibly hot explosion, like an air blast, like a meteorite exploding in midair over the city, and actually over the north end of the sea, or the Dead Sea, sometime around 1700 BC, give or take 50 years or so. Now, that's pretty much in the wheelhouse of when Abraham and Lot would have been living in that area. And the more evidence they uncover, the more the evidence fits the description of what we read in the book of Genesis about the destruction of Sodom. But almost in passing, in his book, Discovering the City of Sodom, Dr. Collins notes that there were 1,500 dolmens, these megalithic funeral monuments, at the base of the city. And I asked the scientific director for the dig about a year ago. I interviewed him for my podcast, Dr. Philip Sylvia. How are these oriented? Are they oriented according to the stars? I mean, the equinox, the solstice? He said, no, they all seem to be aimed at what was the temple in the city of Sodom. Like, okay, so what was worshipped there? The clue that we get, or the clues that we piece together in the book Veneration, was that there are stops in the Exodus that make reference to the spirits of the dead. When Moses and the Israelites had left Kadesh Barnea, were headed towards the land of Canaan, they stopped at a place called Ovoth, which literally from the Hebrew means spirits of the dead. and another called Ai HaAvarim, which means ruins of the travelers. In fact, that word also shows up in a description that God gives to Mount Nebo when he tells Moses, climb this mountain of the Avarim, mountain of the traveler. Who were the travelers? Well, we go back to that ancient kingdom of Ugarit in northern Syria, where the Rephaim spirits are called travelers in the sense that they travel or cross over from the land of the dead to the realm of the living. Something about that area, Mount Nebo and the plains of Moab below it, was known as a location where the spirits crossed over. Well, when they were there on the plains of Moab, this ancient site of Sodom is on a hill kind of jutting out into the plains of Moab. It controlled that fertile plain at the north end of the Dead Sea, which is why it was such an important city that kings from Mesopotamia marched troops for more than 2 months to come there and do battle against their armies. So when Moses and the Israelites got there, hundreds of years after the city had been destroyed, you still see these funerary monuments at the base of this ruined city, the ruins or heaps of the travelers. And while they were there on the plains of Moab, they begin to eat sacrifices offered to the dead. Psalm 106, verse 28. That's why God got upset with them and sent a plague that killed 24,000 Israelites in the book of Numbers. So we connect that, this veneration of the dead, these ancient spirits, with these funerary monuments, these dolmens that are clustered all up and down the Jordan River Valley, but especially at the south end, at what used to be the site of Sodom, and at the north end, which was the ancient kingdom of Bashan. And here's a teaser that we'll leave with people for the conference on this Friday. Bashan, people who've followed the teachings of Dr. Michael Heiser know that in Ugaritic, which is a Semitic language similar to Hebrew, the pronunciation would have been Bathan. And in Ugaritic, Bathan meant serpent or place of the serpent. So the kingdom of Og was a place literally called the place of the serpent or land of the serpent. Right next to Gilgal Rephaim, which is the ancient megalithic site, bigger and older than Stonehenge. 5 huge concentric rings made of piled rock, 40,000 tons of stone. Just a quarter of a mile north of there, 1,100 feet, about a 2-minute walk, is a 3/4 of a mile long ridge shaped like a serpent. We drove right past it on our tour of Israel last year. We didn't notice it because we were all looking out the other side of the Jeep at Gilgal Rephaim. This 3/4 of a mile ridge, 20 to 25 feet high, is 3 times longer and 4 times taller than the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. And we thought, okay, well, maybe this is just some strange remnant of an ancient volcanic eruption, a blob of lava cooled in this weird direction, except when you look at the archaeological information about that site, they found 130 dolmens clustered on the back of this serpent-shaped ridge, and none of them on the ground between the ridge and Gilgal Rephaim, none of them on the fertile agricultural area around it. They're all clustered on the back of the serpent. Interestingly, now, when you go back into ancient Mesopotamian history, you find in the myths of their the myths connected to ancient Mesopotamian religion, they all have a story in which a warrior god, whether it's Ninurta or Anu or Marduk or Enlil, who has to defeat a chaos serpent, a primordial monster representing the force of chaos, Tiamat, or Lotan in the Ugaritic. And in one of these myths, from about 2600 BC, a war god named Ninurta has to defeat a 7-headed serpent. And it's a 7-headed serpent representing chaos. Well, okay. In the Bible, we read of a serpent with multiple heads.
Yes.
Yeah. Not just the dragon, the beast that emerges from the sea in Revelation 13, but when you read the Old Testament carefully, you see Leviathan has multiple heads. Interestingly, the name of this Mesopotamian serpent is Bashmu. In other words, Bashan.
Bashan. All there.
Yeah.
Go to skywatchtv.com, sign up for the True Legends Conference. It is this coming Friday and Saturday, and as a bonus, you will get last year's conference DVDs for free.
Absolutely.
Derek Gilbert, author of a great book, his latest book, Veneration. Get all of them. Bad Moon Rising, Last Clash of the Titans, The Day the Earth Stands Still, Veneration, all of that. Visit him at gilberthouse.org or visit ignitingnation.com and click on today's show, and it'll take you right to a link to buy the book. You can catch Derek Gilbert here on the second Monday of every month in the 11 o'clock hour. Derek, thank you for sterling conversation. Always eye-opening, always revelatory. We look forward to seeing you again next month right here on the Igniting Nation Broadcasting Network on Revealing the Truth. God bless you, my friend, and to your bright and beautiful wife, Sharon.
Amen, and thank you. Always an honor.
Thank you. God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.